This is the Fulton surface-to-air recovery system, a rather alarming-looking method by which military personnel were extracted from dangerous situations from the 1950s to the 1990s. Created by inventor and adventurer Robert Fulton, the system was relatively simple. The person to be retrieved dons a harness and deploys a balloon, with a line attached. A plane approaches low and slow, snags the line, and yanks the individual into the air. While originally used only for cargo pickups, through determined experimentation, Fulton was able to adapt the system to be suitable for humans too, and it was soon adopted by the US Air Force, the US Navy, and the CIA. As uncomfortable and dangerous as it looks, the system saw only a single fatal accident during the decades it was in use. It was only when helicopter pickups became a more viable option that this dramatic retrieval system was finally retired. This is US Route 491 in the Four Corners region of the United States. It's a road that's sometimes referred to as the Devil's Highway, due to the fact that it was previously designated Route 666. 666 is a number that has historically been associated with all things devilish. In fact, the numbering of the road made some people very uncomfortable, to the point that rumours circulated that the route was cursed. After much debate, the road was renamed in 2003. In the weeks and months before the change came into effect, sign theft along the road skyrocketed. Almost every sign bearing the infamous number was stolen, with some sign assemblies even cut down with chainsaws in the dead of night. Route 666's days were numbered, and dozens of people took the opportunity to steal themselves a souvenir of this controversial, satanic-sounding road. This is Vladimir Likonos, a Ukrainian chemistry student who made a very unfortunate, and unfortunately fatal, error. Vladimir often chewed gum while he worked, and had taken to dipping his gum in citric acid powder to give it a pleasingly sour taste. While working on a project that involved an explosive powder, he accidentally confused it with the citric acid and dipped his gum into the explosive by mistake. As he bit down on the explosive-covered gum, it detonated, causing fatal injuries. Vladimir was a quiet, intelligent, and dedicated student who loved chemistry and often spent hours working on projects in his room. As a child, he had even made his own firecrackers. However smart and sensible he usually was, it took only a single moment of confusion to bring his promising life to a sudden and explosive end. This is a ball turret of a type that was common on military aircraft during World War II. A spherical turret depending from the belly of a plane gave the gunner an excellent view of targets and allowed them to defend against attacks from below. However, ball turrets were tiny. Only men below a certain height could actually fit, and they would find themselves in the fetal position, barely able to move. There was so little room that the cocking handles of the guns had to be operated by cables, and there was certainly no space for a parachute inside the turret. The gunner's chute was stored in the aircraft above his head. Claustrophobic, exposed, and with no backup escape route, the job of a ball turret gunner was one that required immense bravery. This is the Voynich manuscript, a 225-page illustrated manuscript handwritten on vellum sometime in the early 1400s, in a language that nobody can decipher. Over the years, many scientists, linguists, cryptographers, and language specialists have attempted to decode the manuscript, but all have been unsuccessful. The origins of this strange artifact are similarly mysterious. It was named after Wilfrid Voynich, a rare book dealer who acquired it in 1912. The owners before him can be traced back as far as the 1700s, but beyond that, the origin is unknown. Some have posited that the book is a hoax, while others, guided by the many illustrations within, believe it to be an encyclopedia of herbs and medicines. Unless the unique script is one day translated, we may simply never know. This is a chainsaw, a device that today is most commonly used to cut back or chop down trees.
However, this rugged device was originally invented for a different purpose. The very first tools that we might recognize as chainsaws were invented as surgical implements. In 1830, German orthopedist Bernhard Heine invented the osteotome, essentially a small, hand-cranked chainsaw that could be used in amputations, excisions, and even childbirth. Despite its alarming appearance, it was used with great success in many operations, and Heine received widespread acclaim for his invention. By the end of the 1800s, though, the osteotome fell out of use, and was generally replaced by a type of wire saw that allowed for neater, narrower cuts. Today, chainsaws are very rarely used in the operating room. This is Jeremy Bentham, an English philosopher and social reformer who died in 1832. Before he passed away, he compiled a set of instructions regarding the disposal of his body. It was first to be dissected, then preserved and displayed. Accordingly, Bentham's skeleton was padded out with hay, dressed in his clothes, and put on display in his favourite chair, complete with a wax replica of his head. This auto-icon, as Bentham referred to it, changed hands several times before ending up in University College London's Student Centre. Bentham is admired for many of his principles, and so his preserved remains are displayed in accordance with his wishes. He was even allowed to sit in on a council meeting once in 2013, where he was recorded as present but not voting.
This is the golden poison dart frog, a brightly coloured, rather cute-looking creature that also happens to be the most poisonous animal in existence. Found in the rainforests of Colombia, these frogs produce a poisonous substance in their skin that's so powerful, one frog could easily kill as many as 20 full-grown humans. Just touching one could expose you to enough poison to result in muscle contractions, paralysis, seizures, heart failure, and death. As you might expect, the golden poison dart frog has few natural predators, as almost no animals, aside from a very small number of snakes, would survive an attempt to snack on one. Despite this, destruction of their natural habitat by humans has landed them on the endangered species list, with a high probability that, despite some incredible natural defense mechanisms, these unique frogs could one day be extinct. This is the Beano T-13, a grenade developed in the latter half of World War II for use by American soldiers fighting in Europe. It was designed to be the approximate size and shape of a baseball, the reasoning being that most of the troops shipping out to war were young men, most of whom would have more experience throwing a baseball than throwing a grenade. It was hoped that supplying soldiers with grenades that mimicked baseballs would allow them to throw further and more accurately, but unfortunately this didn't work out. A few thousand Beano T-13s were sent to the front, and reports came back that the experimental weapons had a tendency to go off prematurely. With this rather major flaw in mind, they were phased out in favour of more conventional grenades. This is an anonymous pensioner who received the worst retirement gift imaginable. On the eve of his retirement, aged 64, his colleagues purchased him a ride in a fighter jet by way of a spectacular send-off. After a rushed medical exam and a confusing briefing, he was strapped into a two-seater fighter jet and taken up for a joyride. As he rocketed skyward, the pensioner grabbed for something to hold onto and accidentally activated his ejector seat. He was blasted from the plane and landed with minor injuries in a nearby field. Thanks to a mechanical fault, the pilot wasn't ejected at the same time and was able to safely land the jet. It's hard to imagine a worse retirement gift than a near-death experience, especially given that, as the man later said, he'd never expressed any interest in taking such a flight in the first place. This is Helen Duncan, the last woman to be tried under the Witchcraft Act of 1735. Born in 1897, Duncan was a medium, albeit one who some people found unconvincing. She was known for regurgitating bits of cloth coated in egg white that she said were ectoplasm. She did, however, garner some attention when she announced the sinking of the HMS Barham during a séance in 1941. It was wartime, and the sinking was supposed to be confidential, with only the bereaved families informed. Worried that Duncan might reveal more military secrets, authorities arrested her, and she was tried under the Witchcraft Act of 1735, a centuries-old act which criminalised not the practice of witchcraft, but the act of falsely claiming to be one. Duncan spent 9 months in jail, and upon her release was made to promise that she would not conduct any more seances. This is Hiroo Onoda, a Japanese soldier who refused to surrender at the end of World War II. Hiroo spent the tail end of the war hiding out in the mountains of Lubang Island in the Philippines, waging guerrilla warfare against Allied forces. When leaflets were dropped in the area announcing the end of the war, Hiroo thought that they were fake. He stayed in hiding even when his fellow soldiers surrendered or were killed in confrontations with local police. Years passed, then decades. In 1974, Hiroo was tracked down by a Japanese explorer, but refused to surrender without a direct order to do so. Eventually, Hiroo's one-time commanding officer, now a civilian, was flown out to the island to finally, formally, relieve the long-serving soldier of his duties. This is Naegleria fowleri, a single-celled organism that's known as the brain-eating amoeba. It's an appropriate name, as this microorganism consumes brain cells, and can cause a brain infection in humans that is very often fatal. It's found in warm water and sometimes in soil, but isn't dangerous unless it's able to access the brain via nerve tissue in the nose. Most infections occur when people accidentally inhale a small amount of water while swimming, or, much more rarely, when they rinse out their nose with infected water. There are some treatments available, but the survival rate is low even when treatment is given. The best way to avoid a brain-eating infection is to avoid the warm, untreated pools where Naegleria fowleri lives, and take a dip in colder water instead. This is a standard office chair with a gas lift for raising and lowering the seat. And this is an office chair, the gas lift of which exploded, causing very serious injuries to the user. Most office chairs are perfectly safe, but some are manufactured in unregulated factories using substandard materials. If mishandled, the gas lifts on these chairs can explode, with deadly results. In China, there have been several fatal chair explosions involving chairs from unregulated factories. The good news is, exploding chairs are almost non-existent when manufacturers are required to conform to strict regulations. If you buy a chair from a well-known brand, use it as you normally would, and dispose of it if the gas lift is ever damaged, you can comfortably relax. This is Charles Havelet, a man widely acknowledged as the last American soldier to die during combat in Europe in World War II. He died in a German ambush on the 7th of May 1945, after a ceasefire had been ordered. Unfortunately, news of this ceasefire took some time to reach every part of the continent. Indeed, it arrived at Charles's unit 10 minutes after he was killed. Though Charles was likely one of the last deaths in Europe, he was certainly not the only one to die that day. Hundreds of soldiers lost their lives in the confusion of the final hours of World War II, painfully close to the peace they had fought so hard to achieve. This is a rat king, a terrifying tangle of rodents that's created when 3 or more rats get their tails entangled. This is most likely to happen during the winter, when moisture can freeze the tails of several unlucky rats together while they sleep, causing the creatures to tie themselves in knots as they attempt to get free. There are records of rat king sightings going back hundreds of years, and even some examples preserved in museums around the world. They tend to provoke feelings of fear and disgust, and are often featured as unsettling elements in horror movies or books. But there's really nothing malign about a rat king. In fact, the unfortunate rats involved probably want nothing more than some help to get their tails untangled. This is the AVCEN Jetpod, a prototype short takeoff and landing aircraft that was designed to revolutionize the way we travel. As well as being incredibly quiet, the Jetpods would require only a very short runway to take off or land, making them ideal for use as a short-range air taxi. While early promotional material looked promising, the project ended in disaster when, in August 2009, a prototype Jetpod crashed during a test flight. The sole occupant was the inventor of the aircraft and the founder of the company developing it, Michael Robert Dacre. He was killed in the crash, and the project was shelved indefinitely shortly thereafter. The sleek, futuristic images of the AVCEN Jetpod ended up as a future that would never come to be. This is Calvin Graham, one of the youngest people to enlist in the US Navy during World War II. He borrowed his older brother's clothes, put on a deep voice, and lied about his age so that he could sign up when he was just 12. He was assigned to the USS South Dakota, where he served bravely and was awarded both a Bronze Star and a Purple Heart, though both these medals were taken away when it was discovered just how young he was. Kicked out of the Navy, Calvin spent many years in obscurity, but in the 1970s began writing to successive presidents to tell his story. Eventually, 2 years after his death in 1994, his Purple Heart was posthumously reinstated, a mark of recognition from the country he'd been so eager to serve. This is a set of clackers, a type of toy that was extremely popular in the 1970s and 1980s. To play, you loop the string onto a finger and with a rapid up-down hand motion, swing them so that they clack against one another. Kids loved them because they were easy to master, colourful, and extremely noisy. Unfortunately, some clackers were more than a little dangerous too. Early versions of the toy were made of tempered glass or hardened plastic, and could shatter after repeated impacts, sending shards of broken clacker flying. Dozens of children were injured before the toys were banned in the US and Canada in 1976. Since then, safer versions have been invented, and clackers enjoy the occasional surge in popularity every few years. Surges which, thankfully, are no longer accompanied by a rash of injuries. This is the so-called Island of the Dolls in Mexico. The small island is located to the south of Mexico City in the canals of Xochimilco. Dozens and then hundreds of dolls started appearing on the island in the 1950s. The first few were placed there by the owner of the island, Don Julian Santana Barrera, to placate the spirit of a young girl who drowned there. Once he'd placed just a few dolls on the island, he reported, dozens more began appearing of their own accord, and soon the whole island was bristling with them. When the original owner died, the place rapidly became the subject of multiple urban legends, and also a tourist attraction, with thousands of people each year making the journey out to the island to explore its decidedly creepy collection. This is the Mary Celeste, an American merchant ship that was found abandoned and adrift in December 1872. Her crew were all missing, as was the ship's only lifeboat and several of the ship's important documents. But other than this, the Mary Celeste was in decent condition. Despite much speculation, it could not be determined just what had happened to cause her to be abandoned. The most likely explanation is that something caused the crew to panic, pile into the lifeboat, and leave the ship in a frantic hurry, only to have it drift away without them. Quite what this panic-inducing event might have been, we have no idea. There were no signs of a struggle, and it appeared that it had been a rapid but orderly evacuation. Given that it took place more than 100 years ago, the abandonment of the Mary Celeste is likely to remain, forever, a mystery. This is a dog, an animal that's often known as man's best friend. Dogs and cats both are kept as pets by millions of people in countries all over the world, and are generally loyal, loving, and interesting animal companions. However, it's a little known fact that your pet might well consider eating you. When owners die unexpectedly in the home and cats or dogs are left without food, they may well start to see their one-time owner as a source of nutrition. Most domestic animals will wait until they're extremely hungry before tucking in, but in some cases dogs have started feasting on their deceased owners as little as 45 minutes after their death. It's not that they don't love you, but a hungry pet might not be as discriminating as we'd like to think. This is a Mickey Mouse costume you might have spotted out and about if you visited Disneyland in 1955. The costume is, to say the least, not something you'd see in the park today. It's big, clumsy, and several gaping holes in the face give it a rather creepy appearance. These Disney character costumes were in fact borrowed from an ice skating show, and thus had numerous large holes to give skaters a good view. They weren't designed to be seen up close. These costumes remained in use for a few years before dedicated, somewhat less disturbing, Mickey and Minnie Mouse costumes were introduced. Happily, the design has since improved so much that it's hard to believe the original costumes were ever in use in the most magical place on Earth. This is a Pfielstorch, a stork that was hit by an arrow in Africa, survived and returned to Europe with the arrow still embedded in its body. This particular unlucky specimen was then shot again, this time fatally, by a hunter. The existence of this and several other Pfielstorch finally settled the question of where birds went during the winter. In the early 1800s, nobody knew for sure, with some great thinkers speculating that birds went to the moon or hibernated on the seabed during the winter months. The African arrow in the neck of the Pfielstorch proved once and for all that birds simply flew abroad to warmer climes, and also demonstrated that storks are surprisingly tough. This is a wild haggis, an extremely unusual creature that thrives in the hilly wilds of Scotland. It's notable for having one pair of legs longer than the other, allowing it to maintain its balance on steep hillsides, but forcing it to travel around a hill in only one direction, clockwise or anti-clockwise depending on which set of legs are longer. The extraordinary looking animal is also entirely fictional. The popular dish of haggis is actually a mix of sheep's innards, spices and oatmeal. The idea that this delicious meal is actually derived from wild haggis that roam the highlands is just a gentle joke aimed at tourists, but one that, according to some surveys, around 30% of visitors to Scotland completely fall for. This is the Carrick-a-Rede rope bridge, a bridge on the coast of Northern Ireland that allows passage out to a minuscule island once used on a daily basis by salmon fishermen as they went about their work. The bridge is now a tourist attraction and is generally known for being terrifyingly precarious, with some visitors finding that, having crossed it once, they cannot face doing so again and have to be taken off the island by boat. It's worth noting though that as scary as the bridge looks today, it's nothing compared to how it looked in the 1800s, when it consisted of a narrow and uneven sequence of planks with only a single rope handrail on one side. There's no knowing what the fishermen who used it every day to haul their heavy catches back to the mainland would think of the bridge one day becoming a tourist attraction. This is Gary Hoy, a highly respected corporate lawyer who died in unusual circumstances. Gary worked on the 24th floor of the Toronto Dominion Bank Tower building and had developed a particular trick to entertain visitors to his office. To demonstrate just how thoroughly unbreakable the windows were, he would sometimes throw himself bodily against them. On the 9th of July 1993, he performed this trick for the last time. Instead of bouncing off the glass as he always had before, Gary plunged through the window and fell to his death in front of a group of visiting students he had been attempting to entertain. Gary had been correct to assert that the glass was unbreakable. The window pane had remained intact, popping cleanly out of the side of the building in one undamaged piece. His fatal mistake had been to forget that, while the window might be indestructible, the frame which held it was not. This is the house that stands at 1 Lavetta Place in Nyack, New York, a house that is, as a matter of law, considered haunted. The original owners experienced a number of encounters with what they believed to be a poltergeist, and even sold a story about their experience to Reader's Digest magazine. When it came time to sell their house, they chose not to mention the resident ghost. Their buyer found out, changed his mind, and sued to get his deposit back. And remarkably, he won. It was ruled that the house was haunted, and that the seller should have disclosed this, just as they would any other defect. The ruling, which later became known as the Ghostbusters ruling, means that, to this day, in New York, you are legally required to disclose when a property you're selling is haunted. This is a Mortsafe, a protective cage that would sometimes be installed atop graves in the early 18th century. The heavy metal cage was designed to keep the body beneath safe from grave robbers, and grave robbers were a big problem. At this time, medical science was advancing swiftly, and doctors were forever in need of corpses to dissect in order to increase their knowledge. Some of them would pay handsome bounties for fresh bodies, an incentive that led to unscrupulous individuals digging up newly buried bodies and selling them to the highest bidder. Some graveyards employed watchmen, while others placed heavy stone slabs over fresh graves. Still others installed mortsafes to ensure that anyone laid to rest in their grounds was, indeed, allowed to rest in peace.